morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, I want to take a look at Girafarig. Yeah, that's right. I went there. I said it. I think it's time to talk a little bit more about Girafarig, because I think Girafarig is one of these Pokemon that should be played a lot more than it actually is. I think there's a lot of mileage we can get from Girafarig that as it stands at the moment, we're just not. Let me explain. Now, I'm not saying Girafarig is not seeing any play. It's the one from Lost Thunder, incidentally. I am not implying nobody plays it. I am implying that we can use it as a tech more than we currently are. So Girafarig, then, came out in Lost Thunder, and yes, for free colourless energy, Mind Shock 70 damage, not affected by weakness or resistance. I mean, even if it hit weakness, and even if we were using stuff like Choice Band, it still wouldn't be a great tech against Mewtwo and Mew, which is, of course, one of the main things we'd be hitting for weakness. So no, this attack is not very good. But that's not what we're using it for. We are using it for the attack Get Lost. Great name, incidentally. 1 colourless energy, put 2 cards from your opponent's discard pile into the Lost Zone. Now that is a very, very fun attack indeed. Now, for newer players, what this essentially is, a Lost Zone, it's like a second discard pile. But it is, in theory, although we play around with it far more than we should, and it happens in every game. It's always called something different, but it's supposed to be, it goes there, it doesn't come back. So, it's gone for the game. And the thing is, we got a couple decks around at the moment that really can be hurt by this. So when we look at decks that are playing it, there's really one deck in which it is seen as a fairly common inclusion, and it is the Oranguru Pidgeotto Stall deck. Now, the real goal of this deck is to use Oranguru, to use resource management to keep getting free cards in your discard pile onto the bottom of your deck, and then Pidgeotto to draw the correct cards when you actually need them. And then you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of different ways to actually go about playing the deck. Most people end up putting Crushing Hammer in there to get rid of energy. We play things like Custom Catcher to continually drag Pokemon off the bench until your opponent just doesn't have any switching options left, bearing in mind that because you're reusing the cards over and over again, your opponent is going to run out of options long before you do. And we got stuff like Jesse and James to try and mess with your opponent's hand, or Mars to do the same thing. Or even something like Chip Chip Ice Axe to make sure your opponent's got a bad top deck. Reset Stamp to put them down to a low hand size if they've taken a bunch of prizes. Not all of them do, but we have seen a bunch of them played with Shedinja to try and make sure that they're just not giving up prizes, because you can of course keep getting Shedinja back. And that deck uses Girafarig, and the reason they use Girafarig, and they don't all play Girafarig incidentally, the second place deck from the Atlantic City Regionals piloted by Grant Manley did not play Girafarig. But a lot of them have done. And the goal here essentially is that if your opponent is trying to get stuff back from their discard pile, you can Lost Zone it. They discard it, hoping to use it later, you Lost Zone it, job's a good 'un. And incidentally, this can work in the mirror match, where your opponent's trying to discard your stuff, but you're discarding it while also Lost Zoning, and that can work. I'm not saying it will work, I'm saying it can work. So why do I think it's good nowadays? And one of the main reasons is Mewtwo and Mew. You see, Mewtwo and Mew is a deck that runs from the discard pile. Mewtwo and Mew's got the Perfection ability, which allows you to copy the attacks of any GXs either on the field, on your side of the field, or in your discard pile. Now, some of them never need to hit the discard pile. Something like Espeon and Deoxys, for instance, you can happily just put on the bench and copy. Reshiram and Charizard, you can just put on the bench and copy. But there's plenty that you can't. So take something like the Charizard GX from Hidden Fates. This is a fairly recent inclusion. I did do a video about the deck, where I went into a fair amount of detail about the deck and new techs people are using. I'll pop a link to that video in the description. But essentially here, the goal is you put the Charizard into your discard pile, and then even though it's a stage 2, you can copy the attack. Sounds quite good, yes? The thing is, you're not playing Charmander, you're not playing Charmeleon, so what could potentially happen here is your opponent is playing this, they put their only Charizard in the discard pile, use Girafarig to Lost Zone it. Now that doesn't mean your opponent cannot use another GX attack, but the other GX attacks they're using in terms of big damage, Reshiram and Charizard, need 6 energy to do 300, they're probably not getting that on early enough. And if you're using Girafarig in a tag team GX deck, well, you can give up 2 non-GX prizes and your opponent still has to KO 2 tag teams to win the game. Something to bear in mind, that you can literally afford to give your opponent a Girafarig KO, and it just doesn't matter. Now, Charizard's a good example in a Mew mirror match, or basically any tag team deck really needs to be worried about your opponent dropping just, go first, turn 2 Charizard. So your opponent goes first, discards Charizard, then you Lost Zone it with Girafarig. The obvious response here is, your opponent won't discard the Charizard until the turn they actually want to use it. Which on the one hand, yes, that is possible. On the other hand, you're now introducing one more thing that can go wrong. Now you not only have to get the Charizard in the discard pile, but you have to get it in the discard pile on one specific turn. And there'll be plenty of times that you can, but there'll be plenty of times that you can't. Or maybe you're playing a deck which is at risk of decking out. So let's take something like Beheeyem, for example. The ideal situation with a Beheeyem deck is that your deck consists of Beheeyem, Elgium, and Triple Acceleration Energy. During your turn, you draw all 3 of those cards, and then you attack with Beheeyem. You put Beheeyem, Elgium, and Triple Acceleration Energy back into your deck, and round you go. If you try doing that, your opponent is going to use Makago GX to discard the top 5 cards of your deck using a GX attack and deck you out. And that's going to be the GX attack of choice, you would imagine, when Mew plays against Beheeyem. So, Lost Zone their Makago. And sure, there'll be games where they can save it in their hand for the perfect time, but it's not always going to work. And that is, of course, when they know you're playing Girafarig. They won't always. But the other thing I actually like here is using it against Oranguru Control. Because remember that Oranguru Control is going to work from the discard pile. Use cards, they're in the discard pile, use resource management to get them right back. So they end up in a discard pile, and you Girafarig them into the Lost Zone. Get rid of both their Crushing Hammer. Now don't get me wrong, once again, your opponent can play around it, but it means you are forcing them into resource managing now for specific cards. And if there are more than 3 cards they need, you can Lost Zone the rest of them. Or maybe you can custom capture something into the active, maybe a Pidgeotto, maybe you combine it with a Reset Stamp, and incidentally, Reset Stamp and Custom Catcher, great combo here if you can get it to stick. And then if your opponent cannot attack for a couple of turns, you can just go about Lost Zoning everything with Girafarig. And do remember, Girafarig Lost Zones 2 cards, so against something like a Mew, it really could be as simple as stop them for a couple of turns and just Lost Zone 4 to 6 attackers and really leave them with only subpar attackers for the particular deck you're playing. And the thing that I love about Girafarig that I really don't think I've pushed enough yet, basic Pokemon, single energy. So it's not like this is only techable in some decks. You don't, except for free attacks, which are just not realistic. You can get them, but it's just not even realistic to hope for them. What you essentially have here is a card which can just super easily be put into any deck you like. That's amazing. It's a really easy tech. Now, I've identified the 2 matchups against which I think it is particularly good, but the reality is it could go into anything. The question you need to ask yourself is there anything my opponent is going to want to play that they're likely to recover? So let's say, for argument's sake, you're playing a Blacephalon deck. and you are really, really worried about Tapu Fini, because Tapu Fini can get a one-hit KO on you for a single colourless energy. Well, what you go and do now is you Lost Zone it. Maybe they use it once, you KO it and Lost Zone it. Or maybe it ends up in the Lost Zone early in the games, they've got to discard it for whatever reason. Then you can go ahead and Lost Zone it. And again, it won't always work. Sometimes they will be able to drop a Brock's Grit and recover it the second, or at least a turn, that you knock it out. But that's okay. Those games are going to happen. I am not in this video advocating that everybody starts playing 4 Girafarig in every deck. No, not what I'm saying. What I am saying is you consider putting 1 Girafarig into your deck so that if you're against one of those decks, either that plays from the discard pile or that is trying to run around recovering the odd card that is going to hurt you, that Girafarig comes in handy. Maybe you are playing a single prize deck and you count the number of energy for Blacephalon, and actually you just roll with your Girafarig, they have to Lost Zone 2 energy to KO it, and then you Lost Zone 2 energy, and then before you know it, they literally don't have enough energy to finish out the game. I'm not saying it's going to work, but I am saying it is very much worth a try. Girafarig strikes me as one of those cards that can really turn matchups. And it's not every game, but it's you play a 7 or 8 round tournament and this swings 2 games, but that's totally worth it for one of your 60 cards. And I've had a bunch of messages from people going, hey, well, see, we really like it when you do videos about underplayed techs and cards that should be played a bit more. Can you do some more of them? Yes. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, yes. So there we go. That's Girafarig. I think it's really good. I think it should be played a bit more, but I would be very interested to know what you think, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.